moving on to Richard II. Strange looking chap. You can see the crown. It's the same moving across. So what can we find out from Richard II? Ricardo. I can see at the top there. Alright, so Richard II. So Richard lived from the 6th of January 1367 to around about the 12th of February 1400. He reigned from the 21st of June 1377 till the 29th of September 1399. So you'll see here that we have got one of those instances where he died after his reign ended. So I wonder who took the throne from him whilst he was alive. This portrait really unsettles me because he's looking straight on, whereas all the other portraits have been kind of side, like sitting, like facing off to another side, or just the head tilted slightly, but I find this quite unnerving. So, Richard II was the son of Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, which we found out in the last video. So he was the grandson of Edward III. Because, you know, we found out that the Black Prince died before he could take the throne. So he was crowned king when he was just 10. And apart from one high point when he faced down the Peasants Revolt at age 14, things didn't go too well for Richard. I can kind of tell. He seems pretty, like a weak, like ruler. I don't know. I just have that impression from him. Alright. So Richard's reign started well. When he was just 14, he bravely handled the Peasants' Revolt. Now, if my history serves me correctly, I think the Peasants' Revolt had something to do with the Black Death that we saw in the previous video. And like I said in that video, because it wiped out so many people, the kind of old way, like the feudal system of like lords, peasants, and that sort of triangle of hierarchy was disturbed, because now there wasn't enough people to work the land, to rule the land, etc. So I believe the Peasants' Revolt had something to do with the re-establishment of that system. At least I think that's what it is. Historical buffs in the listening, please correct me if I'm wrong. So, we go on to find out a little bit what the Peasants' Revolt was. This was a group of rebels led by Wat Taylor, who were protesting against higher taxes and all-round rotten treatment. When they reached London, the young king rode out to meet them. There was a fight, and the Lord Mayor of London killed Wat Taylor Richard stepped forward and called out, "I am your leader, follow me." The rebels, rather impressed, left without any more violence, although unfortunately government troops later caught up with and executed many of the rebels. The king was later forced by his council to take back many of his promises and pardons. I'm going to try that next time. I am your leader, follow me. Okay. As Richard grew up, things really started to go downhill. He must have been sick of all of his councillors and uncles, of which he had quite a number, ordering him around, and so he became bossy and demanding young man, preferring his chosen but unpopular favourites over his other advisors. That sounds like another king we looked at, right? For many years, Richard's uncle Thomas, Duke of Gloucester, held much of the power at court. In 1388, a group of lords headed by Gloucester held the merciless Parliament, in which they sentenced many of the king's friends and favourites to death. Oh dear. Richard didn't have much choice but to give in to his advisors. Parliament had threatened to knock him off the throne if he didn't. Although the next few years were relatively peaceful, Richard waited and his anger stewed. Revenge on his enemies came years later in 1397. He had the leaders of the merciless Parliament arrested and executed or banished. Banishment was the punishment chosen for the son of Richard's powerful old uncle, John of Gaunt. We'll come back to look at John of Gaunt in a second. When Gaunt then died, Richard took over his lands, instead of letting them pass to Gaunt's exiled son, Henry Bolingbroke. Bolingbroke was furious, and when Richard went off to try and sort out problems in Ireland, Henry invaded England in order to reclaim his father's inheritance, winning support among much of the nobility in the process. Cheeky. Richard returned to find his country turned against him. He surrendered without a fight. Yeah, I bet he did. Everyone else seemed to agree that Bolingbroke should now be king. So Richard ended up giving up the throne completely and being imprisoned in Pontefract Castle. Henry Bolingbroke was now Henry IV, and the House of Lancaster had begun. What a sissy. Literally just comes home and somebody's sitting on your chair and you were like, yeah, fine, take it, whatever. Anyway, crowning glory. Richard II might not have been the greatest ruler, but as patron of the arts, he was one of the best. Richard transformed the Norman-built Westminster Hall into the building we see today, now the oldest parliamentary building in England. He was also a patron of the great medieval poet Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales, and he ordered the painting of the Wilton Diptych, which is now in the National Gallery, London. This means that today you can visit a place, read a book, or see a wonderful work of art that were all created during the reign of Richard II. That's quite interesting. Royal romance? Question mark. We don't actually know all that much about Richard II's first wife, Anne of Bohemia. What we do know is that Richard must have loved as when she died from a plague in 1394, he was heartbroken. He had the palace where she died, Sheen Palace, completely burnt to the ground. Wow. The following year, he placed an order for a double tomb, the first ever for an English royal couple. That's a shame. Like I've said time and time again in this, nobody ever cares about the women. But we'll come back and see a little bit of Anne of Bohemia. Bit dramatic, burning down the place where she died. But in a sense, if it was plague-ridden, I mean, probably for the best, right? Awkward end. Whilst Richard II lived, even when he was in prison, his few supporters plotted against the new King Henry. Henry decided, therefore, that Richard had to die. No one knows quite how it happened, but many historians think Henry, not wanting to get his hands dirty, simply left Richard to starve to death. Oh, that's grim. That is so grim. People were so mean back then. Oh, they still are, but you know what I mean. So let's look at John of Gaunt, Richard's uncle. So John of Gaunt, 1340 to 1399, he was the Duke of Lancaster. John of Gaunt, or rather Ghent, was the town in Belgium where John was born. He was the fourth son of Edward III, which we looked at last time. Through his titles and marriages, John owned over 30 castles and controlled land in almost every part of the country. He was as rich as a king. Unsurprisingly, this didn't make him very popular with everyone else. He helped to look after his nephew, the 10-year-old Richard II, and it was some of John's bad decision-making that led to the Peasants Revolt in 1381. John is probably most remembered for being the father of Henry Bolingbroke, the man who would take the throne from Richard II and to become Henry IV, the first ruler of the House of Lancaster. So that's John of Gaunt, Richard II's uncle. We'll move on to Henry IV in the next video. Let's take a look at Anne of Bohemia, Richard II's first wife. She was born in 1366 and died in 1394 and was known as Queen Anne. Anne was the first wife of Richard II, a member of the House of Luxembourg. She was the eldest daughter of Charles IV, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia. On her arrival in England in December 1381, Anne was severely criticised by contemporary chroniclers and was described by one as a tiny scrap of humanity. That's a little bit harsh. What do they mean by that? However, she was a very kind person and later became popular with the people of England. So, a tiny scrap of humanity. I'm just gonna assume that they meant that she was quiet and peaceful and kind and maybe not a queen in their eyes. I don't know. She died of the plague in 1394. This was a devastating blow to Richard, whose subsequent unwise conduct lost him the throne. One would imagine maybe that his bad decision-making was caused by Anne's death and it maybe clouded his judgment. So, let's look at the painting, even though it creeps me out no end. So you see, we have the crown that we saw in the last video, that kind of elfish pointiness. He's got this very short bulb cape that goes like around his shoulders. It's like a tunic-y thing mixed with this like necklace royal like choker thing around him. His eyes are so dead. I don't like the way he's looking at the camera. The portraitist. Alright, so let's look at this timeline down here. In 1367, Richard is born. In 1377, Richard II succeeds to the throne. In 1381, Richard II marries Anne of Bohemia, which we've already looked at. In 1381, you have the Peasants Revolt, and it comes to London. So, we've learned a little bit about the Peasants Revolt and why it happened. In the aftermath of the Black Death, agricultural workers were in high demand, but landlords still refused to pay higher wages and wouldn't allow migration for work. Taxation levels were also high, and the masses rebelled, converging on London. So my guess at the Peasants' Revolt, well, my bits and pieces of memory were kind of correct, so that's cool. So in 1396, Richard II marries Isabella of Valois. Got a little bit about her here, which we'll read. So Isabella of Valois, 1389 to 1409, she was known as Queen Isabella. Isabella was the daughter of King Charles VI of France and Isabeau of Bavaria. On the 31st of October 1396, Halloween, at the age of 6, sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to exclaim like that. At the age of 6, Isabella married Richard II of England in a move for peace with France. Although the union was political, Richard II and the child Isabella developed a mutually respectful relationship. Thank God. The Queen was moved to Porchester Castle for protection, whilst Richard went on a military campaign in Ireland. Okay. Just 3 years after their marriage, Isabella was widowed. She later married Charles, Duke of Orleans, dying in childbirth at the age of 19. Oh my goodness, what a tragic story. She literally had no life. Married at 6, died of childbirth at 19. That is probably the saddest thing I've ever heard. Alright, poor Isabella. And in 1400, Richard II dies. Okay, so Richard, you are rubbish. Rubbish king. Not only did you just not make any good decisions, you let Henry take the throne from you. Stupid boy. Alright, so we're going to look at the quiz and see how much information we've remembered. Okay, question 1 of 4. Who was Richard II's father? Was it Edward III? Was it John of Gaunt? Was it Thomas, Duke of Gloucester? Or was it the Black Prince? So we know Edward III was his granddad, his grandfather. John of Gaunt was his uncle. I don't know who Thomas, Duke of Gloucester was. And the Black Prince was Edward III's son, therefore his dad. Correct. Richard II was the son of the Black Prince, Edward of Woodstock, and his wife Joan, the fair maiden of Kent. Alright. Question 2 of 4. How old was Richard II when he helped put down the 1381 Peasants' Revolt? Was he 35, 51, 9 or 14. I remember he was 14 because I just pictured him shouting, "I am your leader, follow me," at 14 years old. Correct. Richard II was just 14 when he bravely handled the Peasants Revolt led by what tailor? Alright, question 3 of 4. In 1388, many of Richard II's friends and favourites were sentenced to death during which event? Was it the Luddite Rebellion, the Merciless Parliament, the Long Parliament, or the Gunpowder Plot? Some of you may be interested to know I'm putting together something for that, so it's not going to be that. I'm going to go for the Merciless Parliament because they mercilessly killed everybody. The Merciless Parliament of 1388, led by Richard's uncle Thomas, Duke of Gloucester, that's what the Duke of Gloucester was before, resulted in many of his friends and favourites being sentenced to death. So mean. Question 4 of 4. Richard took the lands of his uncle John of Gaunt. This infuriated John of Gaunt's son, but what was his name? Was it Wat Tyler? Was it Edward of Woodstock? Or was it Henry of Bolingbroke? Or was it Richard of Shrewsbury? Wat Taylor, he led the rebellion. Edward of Woodstock was his dad. Richard of Shrewsbury, not sure what part he played, but Henry Bolingbroke was the guy. Correct. Henry Bolingbroke was the son of John of Gaunt, and he was to have his revenge for the taking of his father's lands by taking the throne from Richard. So we got 4 crowns out of 4. Alright, so that is Richard II. These kings, man, they're either really good or they're really bad, and they have like tiny little saving graces here and there, but mostly they're a bit rubbish. But I'm really, really looking forward to coming on to Henry, because now we start the House of Lancaster. And this is a very, very famous part of history. You will probably know it from Game of Thrones, where it's based on, because now you have the War of the Roses. We get into the reign of all the Henrys that we know about, like Henry VIII and all of that. Lancaster, York, Tudor. So, I will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I really hope you found it to be relaxing as well as informative. And I really look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you have a wonderful day.